Hello, hi, good evening. I hope you're doing fine. Okay, it's teacher Becky here, and today evening, I want us to look at English paper 3. Yes, I know we have paper 1, paper 2, and paper 3 in English. That is 101 stroke 1, 101 stroke 2, and 101 stroke 3. And when we talk of paper 3, uh, we have a number of questions, of course. But my concern today will be how do we handle the set book based questions? How do we handle the set book based questions? The book that I'm going to use to illustrate is the book Inheritance, the play Inheritance by David Mulwa. That is a book I'm going to use. I'm going to use a question from that book to try and elaborate on a few aspects. Now, in paper 3, of course, you're going to have 3 questions. One question, which is you'll be having uh, 2 questions from which to select from A or B. So you choose one. Then the second question, which is compulsory, and the third question, which will be required to select from the options that will be given to you based on the book that you do, that is in your school. So I'm going to look at this book Inheritance, and I'm going to use this question that you're seeing right here. The play Inheritance clearly brings out the opposite meaning of the saying blood is thicker than water. The play Inheritance clearly brings out the opposite meaning of the saying blood is thicker than water. So the expectation is to write an essay to justify this, and the question is worth 20 marks. So to begin with, let me start by saying that essay based questions are not difficult questions. They are not hard. What you need to do is to understand the key thing, the key issue being addressed in the question. What you need to take note of is what the question is asking you to do, so that you don't address another issue altogether. So like in our question, we are talking about the opposite meaning, that the play Inheritance clearly brings out the opposite meaning of the saying that blood is thicker than water. So that is what you need to understand. It brings out the opposite meaning. Once you understand that, you will be at a position of answering the question. Now, what will you be required to have? You're supposed to have an introduction, a body, and conclusion. Introduction, body, and conclusion. So make sure you have those 3 important things, because the other remaining marks, other than for the introduction, for the body, and for the conclusion, the other marks is for the language use. So we are going to look at how you're supposed to bring out your introduction, how you're supposed to write your introduction, your body, and your conclusion, so that you make sure that you get a good mark out of 20 marks, the 20 marks that you have been given there in that particular question. So now, how do you write your introduction? I've said that you need to have an introduction, and this introduction you write is worth 2 marks. 2 marks. And don't just say that don't think that these 2 marks are not good enough for you, because without the 2 marks you might not achieve the required marks. So you can write your introduction, you can express your introduction in a number of ways. For instance, you could decide to use a persuasive approach. And this kind of approach, what you do, you now try to convince the person reading your work. For instance, in this case, the examiner, you try to convince them, the reader, to accept your point of view, to see things from your own point, from your own perspective. And then you could also use an outline approach, whereby you now outline the points that you wish to discuss in the body. So that means you already have to have, you know, a template before you write. Think of the points to discuss in the body, so that actually that one helps you to avoid confusion in the writing. So in the outline approach, you will, list those points that you're going to elaborate and illustrate in the body. You could also decide to use the contextual approach, that is based on the text, or even give a general introduction, whereby now you comment on what is happening in general, but of course you don't go far away from the text. It must be based on the given text. For instance, in this case, the book Inheritance. Now, for the introduction, you need to understand that always the introduction you give must be one paragraph. The introduction must be one paragraph and not anything more than a paragraph. The introduction you write, it should not spill over to the second paragraph. Only one paragraph. And in this paragraph, show your understanding of the question. That is why I said, as a student, learn to underline the key points, underline the key issues. Teach your student to underline the key issue brought forth in the question, so that they don't forget. The things you should not do in the introduction: don't define terminologies, don't define statements in the introduction. For instance, in our statement we have blood is thicker than water. Don't start by saying that this saying means that, or blood is this and that. For instance, we have a question of abuse of power. The question that goes this way: abuse of power has led to failure of many countries in Africa and elsewhere in the world. With relevant examples from Inheritance, write an essay to illustrate this statement. Abuse of power has led to failure of many countries in Africa and elsewhere in the world. With relevant examples from Inheritance, write an essay to illustrate this statement. Now, for such a question, you don't begin by saying that abuse of power is this or that. No, don't define terminologies. Then now, what do you do in the body? So in the body, you need to have at least 4 points. At least, make sure that you have at least 4 points. Because per paragraph, at most 3 marks to total up to 12 marks. Now, there are those people who ask, is it okay if I have a 5th point? Well, it's good to have a backup point, an extra point, so you can have it. And what you need to understand, that in this section, that is the body part, where you write now the content of your essay, each point you give should be discussed. Always learn to discuss each point in a paragraph of its own. Each point should be in a paragraph of its own. Now, in Form 1, there is a topic on the structure of a paragraph. That is how a paragraph should be. And we have the topic sentence in a paragraph. Then from there, we have the supporting sentences and the clincher sentence. So make sure that your paragraph has those. It has the topic sentence, which is in most cases is always the first sentence. Then we have the supporting sentences, and then the last sentence of your paragraph. And when you're explaining your point, make sure that at least give 2 illustrations. That is, if they are there in the set book. Learn to give at least 2 illustrations if they are there in the set book. That is for each point. Also, when you're writing, Use linking words. Use linking words. Use sentence connectors. Use a variety of sentences when you're writing. Use simple sentence, the complex sentences, the compound ones, the compound complex sentences. Use a variety of sentences because it shows a clear understanding. It shows you are a good student. Then use linking words to join ideas. Use linking words. Use connectors, and let them be used correctly. Let them be used in the right way. Then again, in the conclusion, we now go to the conclusion of your essay. Remember, we are talking of the set book based questions. So in the conclusion of your essay, make sure that you are winding up, you are summing up everything. And the conclusion you give must be the last paragraph of your essay. It must be the last. Don't write the conclusion and then you bring forth another issue or another idea. No, let it be the last. I repeat, the last paragraph of your essay. Now, when you're writing your conclusion, it can be one that is opinion based, where you give your opinion related to the topic of discussion. So, how do you end such an essay? How do you end in an opinion based conclusion? So, you can write like, I strongly agree that this and that should be like that. I strongly feel that, and so forth. There are cases where you could use a proverb or even a wise saying, but you need to understand this. The proverb you give must be related to what the question is asking. It must be related to what the question is addressing. Because in case you give a proverb that is not in line with the question, with what is being addressed, then of course you will lose marks. You will lose marks, and no one wants you to lose those marks. So to be on the safe side, only use a proverb if you're sure it is in line with the issue being addressed. And always, the conclusion shouldn't be too long. No, it should be too long. For some cases, in fact, a single sentence can serve as a conclusion. And when you're writing your conclusion, use words such as I conclude, to sum up. Another word that you can use is true, it is evident, in conclusion, and so forth. So that is how you write your conclusion. The other thing that is worth noting is that when you're writing or answering set book based questions, you need to always give specific details in the text. There are cases whereby people are attempted to give narrations, stories, paukwa pakawa. You give stories that are irrelevant. So give specific details that are in the text. Don't confuse one book for another. For instance, when you're asked to discuss the set book, the play Inheritance, and then you bring in characters from A Doll's House. For instance, instead of you talking over Lacuna Castle, Princess Sangoi, and so forth, you start talking about Nora, you start talking about Dr. Rang, Mrs. Lide, about Krogstad, and so forth. Talk about the specific book. If it is the event, talk about the events that occurred or happened in that particular book. Don't mix books. Don't mix the ideas from one book to another. Then learn to paraphrase. It is important to learn to paraphrase because it will be very difficult to pick words as they are, if it's a dialogue as it is from even remember it from the book. Paraphrase. And I repeat again, this issue of specific details, pay much attention on it. So give specific details. The specific details must be given. For instance, what do I mean by saying specific details? Talk about the specific character. What happened to that character? Who is that character who receives the action? What was the reaction of that character? What does that character do? Yes, use words that are used in the text. If it even shows someone that you can even remember and recall what is in the book. Now, like now, if we are to talk about this question that we have here, the question of blood on blood is thicker than water, where you're supposed to bring out the opposite meaning of the saying that blood is thicker than water. When you write your introduction, now let us look at the content or the body. Talk about the specific character. Like now you could talk of a character like Lakuna Kaso. Lakuna Kaso, that is the character himself. What did he do? Talk of the actions that he did. For instance, you could say that King Kutula the 15th, that is who is the father. So Lakuna kills his own dad. He kills his own father. He was, that is, he is manipulated by Bishop Menija to end the life of his father, to kill his own father. And he does it in a very cold way. How does he do it? He carelessly poisons his own father due to the greedy nature, his greedy nature. Yes, the greed for power and leadership. So in that case, you will have mentioned Lakuna, that is the person who does it. He does the action to who, and then what he does, and also try to bring out that that blood isn't always thicker than water. Let that aspect be brought out so well. So it is evident from the above illustrations, for instance, that blood isn't always thicker than water, and so forth. Talk about Lakuna, how he treats his own sister, the half sister, Princess Sangoi. He locks this girl, this Princess Sangoi, out of government when he is in power. So he openly, it's not something that he was hiding, it's something that he did openly. He openly shows hostility towards her. Talk about King Kutula and Princess Sangoi, the relationship that these two had. Remember, Princess Sangoi is an adopted daughter to King Kutula the 15th. This King Kutula has a biological son, Lakuna Kaso, but he felt free being with being with Princess Sangoi than with Lakuna Kaso. So let those aspects be brought out. Make it clear that indeed that blood isn't always thicker than water. The other thing, when you're answering these kind of questions, use present tense. Use present tense. Don't use past. Use present tense when addressing the essay-based questions. So we've talked of the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. Make sure you have all those details. Revise more on how to write an introduction, how to perfect on your writing skills, how to write your conclusion. Unless you practice, these things might seem hard. So practice makes perfect. So thank you so much for listening up to this point. May the Lord be with you. May He guide you and help you understand, even as you teach and even as you be taught. Stay tuned for the next class, for the next video. Thank you so much.